Year 12, we're back into it again now with Chapter 3 on ecosystem dynamics. This is part of Topic 2 of Unit 3, so we're now in the back half of Unit 3. In this topic, we're going to be covering ecosystem dynamics, which covers flow of matter and energy, species interactions within ecosystems, keystone species, that sort of thing. As well as that, we're going to be looking at population ecology, how populations grow, shrink, all that sort of stuff. And we're going to be looking at succession or ecological succession, which you'll understand when we get to it. For now, this video is just going to go through some of the ecosystem dynamics, energetic side of things. So looking at trophic relationships and the flow of energy. Now, we did look at this last year. So this is mostly going to be a recap, hopefully nice and quick. All right. In terms of the objectives, there is a lot in Chapter 3. It's a big chapter, but this is what we sort of want to revise, I suppose, in this video. Okay, so we're looking to sequence and explain the transfer and transformation of solar energy into biomass as it flows through biocomponents of an ecosystem. Effectively, that can be summarized as the plants take sunlight energy, turn it into chemical energy as food, and then that flows through our food webs, food chains. Okay, implementing parts of the carbon cycle as well, the trapping of carbon dioxide from the air. And I suppose there's no point me explaining it all now. We might as well get into it. I might get rid of my little video preview so you can actually read what we're doing. All right, so this is all a recap for you. You all know this. All energy on Earth effectively comes from the sun, especially when we're talking about energy within an ecosystem. So all living things ultimately get their energy from the sun through the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis uses the sunlight energy along with chlorophyll pigment and chloroplast to undergo carbon fixation, where it takes carbon from the air and fixes it or converts it into organic sugar molecules, which can then be used for food. Now, these organic sugar molecules are used by the plants to use it themselves. It's their own food that they make, but it's also stored in the plant, and then when something eats a plant, it gets that energy. Okay, so producers, again, this is all revision. Producers are the base level of energy in an ecosystem. They're at the bottom of the trophic pyramid, however you want to arrange it. They get energy directly from the sun. They have the most amount of energy. Okay, they set the level of energy in the ecosystem. They get this energy, as I mentioned just a moment ago, by photosynthesizing, producing energy and capturing carbon to grow and generate biomass. So not only are they capturing and converting that sunlight energy into chemical energy, which can be used throughout the entire food web, but they're also capturing carbon to make biomass. So they're growing and building their own tissues from the biomass. Well, they're making that biomass by trapping carbon. Without producers, we wouldn't A, be able to get any energy, and B, we wouldn't be able to get carbon to make all the biomass. That's all then passed on to subsequent trophic levels. You can see illustrated in this diagram what we've alluded to before, the rule of 10, and we'll illustrate that later, but effectively you can see that energy starts off high in the lower levels and decreases as you go up. So the trophic pyramid, which is illustrated there, was on the last slide as well, shows that all energy and biomass produced by the autotrophs, then moving up to the higher trophic levels to our heterotrophs, consumers. As it moves up, it decreases. So the greatest amount of biomass and the greatest amount of energy is found in that lowest trophic level. Okay, then moving up to the primary consumers, that first trophic level that are consuming, they have less than the producers. Secondary consumers have less than the primary consumers, and tertiary, etc. Okay, a healthy ecosystem will have this pyramid shape. If it's unbalanced and there is less biomass, less energy in the producers, the entire ecosystem will collapse. When we're calculating our energy transfers and transformation, we need to take into account that the whole purpose of the energy is so that these organisms can live. They need energy to grow, to reproduce. They need it to maintain homeostasis. They need it so that they can move, which all living things do. They need it for synthesis, producing their own chemicals, and also for any sort of metabolic processes. So what that means is that very little of that energy actually gets stored within the organism. Most of it gets passed on, unless you're a human and we overeat and then you get fat. That's stored energy. But ideally, most of the energy gets used up, and then only generally about 10% is passed on. So the general rule of thumb in ecology is that only 10% of energy at one trophic level is passed on to the next. The other 90%, generally about 80% of that is used through metabolism, through growth, reproduction, all that stuff we saw before. Another 10% is lost as detritus. So if you think about a human, detritus that we produce would be feces, dead skin, dead hair, that sort of stuff, bits that fall off and die. Okay, the vast majority of this energy though is lost through metabolism and then released as heat energy. In reality, those numbers vary a lot. Ectothermic organisms like lizards are using a lot less energy for metabolism, and so they are able to pass more on, okay? As we see here, due to a decreasing amount of energy moving up the trophic levels, that means that higher order consumers are forced to eat larger amounts of prey. Okay. As a result, we have higher biomass at lower levels because the primary consumers need to eat a lot of producers to get enough energy. The secondary consumers need to eat a lot of primary consumers to get enough energy, and so on. So as a result, we end up with that pyramid shape. Okay, and you can look at the amount of energy as well as biomass decreases as we move up. 6,300 to 1,250 to 250 to 550 overall. When we're calculating it, when we're looking at efficiency, okay, not necessarily calculating energy transfer. When we're calculating energy transfer, we use that rule of thumb of 10% gets passed on. Okay, remember, it's a rule of thumb, but it's not always going to be accurate. It does vary, okay? What I would say to you is if in a question in the exam you are given the values like we are in this picture here, use the values given. If you're not given any values, if you're just told light energy available is 42,000 kilojoules per meter squared per year, and no other numbers here, then you use the rule of 10. Okay. In terms of calculating efficiency, energy efficiency, it is a simple percentage efficiency formula. It's the same that you would have used before. Net productivity divided by net productivity of the previous level. So to calculate the energy efficiency of one of these, okay, if I want to calculate the energy efficiency of the primary consumers, it's going to be 1,250 divided by 6,300 multiplied by 100 to give us a percentage. If we have a look here, this is looking from the percent efficiency of producers. We've got 6,300 divided by 42,000 times by 100 gives us 15%. It's a simple percentage calculation. You guys would have done in maths a million times over. Energy flow diagrams, generally, some of you got this wrong in the data test. A key part is that arrows show the direction of energy flow. So they are pointing to the thing that is doing the consuming, the thing that is doing the eating. Boxes are used to represent trophic levels in sequence, as you can see in that previous picture. Heat level from metabolic processes is lost at each energy trophic level, and we usually represent that by an arrow leaving that trophic level. Detritivores and decomposers are included as a subtrophic level, and we'll see some examples of that. And the main reason is because every trophic level feeds into detritivores and decomposers. That's that 10% of energy that's being lost as detritus, feces, lost tissues. You know, you can, like when a plant loses a leaf, branch, etc. And total heat energy lost must equal the amount of chemical energy brought in. So what that means is, if you're looking at a energy flow diagram, then the amount of energy going in at the very beginning, 100,000 joules, must equal all of this added up at the end. Okay, so it's going to equal that 80 plus 10 plus 8 plus 1 plus 800 plus 200. All of that should equal the 100,000 joules, because energy can't be created or destroyed. So energy in should equal energy out at the end of it. And this is an example here of an energy flow diagram. In the exam, at the end of the year, you will likely, and it has popped up in previous years, be asked to do calculations based on a diagram such as this, or construct a diagram such as this. So you need to understand your way around it. In terms of nutrient cycling, okay, because we're not just talking about the passing on of energy in our trophic relationships, in our food webs and food chains, we have nutrient cycling as well. Now, we'll stress that the level of detail of this content that will pop up on the exam will generally be pretty minimal. It'll be along the lines of, you know, where does it come from? Where does it go? Okay, so if we have a look here at the carbon cycle involves one major biochemical loop, which are the ones we're worried about. Okay, this isn't earth science, this is biology. So you can see that between photosynthesis and respiration, we have a loop. Okay, photosynthesis, producers make that energy. Okay, decomposers, consumers all use it up through cellular respiration. So this biochemical loop here, okay, this biochemical loop here is what we're interested in terms of our ecosystems, because CO2 is coming in from the air, okay? It is then going from producers to either decomposers or consumers, going from consumers to other consumers to other consumers. But at the end of the day, okay, all of that carbon gets used up or released through cellular respiration. As we know, cellular respiration produces carbon dioxide by breaking down sugars. Okay, so it gets cycled through the ecosystem in that way, through photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So producers absorb carbon from the atmosphere during photosynthesis, converting it into plant matter, into biomass. This is then consumed by consumers during cellular respiration, which is CR, and releases carbon back into the air, which is a constant cycle. We can have carbon becoming trapped in sinks if it doesn't fully decompose, if it's not eaten, and then generally that will be locked away, but then it can be released through human activity, volcanic activity, that sort of thing. But again, this is an earth science. The main thing you need to know in terms of ecology is that loop between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. In terms of the nitrogen cycle, big important fact here is that elemental nitrogen, N2, which makes up a huge proportion, the majority of our atmosphere, can't be absorbed as is by plants or animals. We need a lot of nitrogen. Our proteins, our tissue, our DNA is all based on nitrogen. So we need a lot of it, but we can't just access it from the air. It needs to be fixed, which means it needs to be converted into a form we can use, which is done by nitrogen fixing bacteria. Okay, and they take that N2 and turn it into nitrates or ammonia. So in that nitrogen cycle, N2 is absorbed from the atmosphere by nitrogen fixing bacteria, okay, and then they will put it into the soils and it enters the biosphere in this way. It then goes to plants, from plants it goes to consumers, okay, again, producers being very key here. You can see that cycle represented there. As with before, anything that really takes part in the soil is not what we're worried about. We're worried about the loops between living things, okay? So once that nitrogen has been fixed, it can be taken up by producers, which can then pass on to consumers. The water cycle. We need water, okay? We need water for basic metabolism. I'm not going to go through the water cycle. It's pretty basic and you guys understand it. But the main thing is that this evapotranspiration loop here. So transpiration from plants, they lose water, which they're producing through all their various processes. That goes into the air, rains down, comes back. Animals drink it, plants soak it up through the soil, etc., etc. The phosphorus cycle, also very important. We need phosphorus for ATP, which is how we get our energy, and we need it for the phosphates that make up the backbone of our DNA, okay? It happens mainly through geological loops. It doesn't really cycle through living things all that much. It's mostly inorganic, but it is cycled through waste and cycled majorly through guano, through feces, through that sort of waste. And then that fertilizes the soil, it's soaked up by plants, and then they're eaten by animals or decomposes, and that's how we get it, okay? But a lot of phosphate is cycled through geological pathways. One of the reasons why fertilizers are so important is this phosphate is often a limiting factor. And so we need to get it from fertilizers. That is it for that. In terms of covering this content again, or in terms of you revising it, we'll have some worksheets up on the OneNote for you to work through. The main thing to take away from this little topic, you need to understand the little biochemical loops of those important nutrients of carbon, nitrogen, phosphate being the big ones, okay? And we will also be going through the calculations required for looking at energy transfer through the ecosystem. And we'll be doing that primarily through practice calculations and worksheets, okay? Hopefully you found this useful and hopefully you can learn from it. As always, hit up your teachers if you've got some questions. Thank you.